We'll be taking it in turns this morning as we share the session. Firstly, we'll offer up a brief introduction to user experience research, or UXR, how we carry it out, what this means for our products and the visuals that we use now, and the ones that we are looking toward in the future. And there should be plenty of time for questions at the end, so please feel free to put them into the chat as we go, or wait until we open things up a little later on. And as we go, we'll be showing some screenshots of the visuals and the artifacts that we've worked on. But please don't worry about trying to see all the detail on these, because at the end of the presentation, we'll pop a link into the chat. That's for a shared folder that contains some examples of these, so you can take the time and read through these if you want to. Now, this morning, we're combining one of us controlling the presentation for both of us and my exceptionally rural broadband. So fingers crossed it all goes smoothly. We'll make it to the end. So first of all, what is user experience research? Well, put simply, user experience research, or UXR, is engaging with the people that use our digital interfaces or products so that we can firstly learn more about them, their needs and their frustrations. Because this helps us to understand context, impact, and who our students, staff, partners, or visitors are as people. We learn about their preferences, their goals and their needs, and importantly, how they respond and behave in different situations. And secondly, we also test our digital interfaces to see how well these serve the needs or tasks that those people are trying to complete. And this research approach fits into the activities that we, as a design team, carry out. And we follow the principles of design thinking. We don't need to understand this in any detail now, just that it's a non-linear, iterative approach that focuses on firstly understanding the problem that needs to be solved, and then looking at how we can best solve that problem and what solution we can come up with. And throughout this process, UXR is helping to make sure that we understand what our users need so we can confidently define that problem, then plan and carry out the tests needed to evaluate our progress. And we do user experience research because it provides a number of benefits. So firstly, when we get to know the people that use our products, we generate empathy, and we can use the outputs from the research to share and grow this empathy throughout our team and the wider university. So we've got our immediate colleagues in design, that is our content designers or our UX or visual designers, and they're able to understand more about why people use our tools and the environment, state, or context in which they do so. And this means that they're better placed to make decisions that improve the user experience. Secondly, we also make decisions based on impact. So we have colleagues in our product team that can use the insight that we generate to prioritize roadmaps and product plans to have the greatest impact with the resources available. And we're able to share what we learn with the wider university and help to develop a broader awareness generally. So UXR can be used at an operational level to influence decisions about products and services, and it can also be used to influence decision-making at a strategic level. So by understanding our users' needs, wants, motivations, and frustrations, we can also input into the direction of our strategy.
Perfect. So how do we do that? So it's really important to us that we put the users at the heart of everything that we do, and that is really key to achieving our 2030 digital strategy. So since the start of 2023, we have spoken to over 500 students across 32 different activities, including workshops, one-on-one interviews, and diary studies, as well as using the quantitative findings from student surveys and feedback across the institution to help validate our findings. So a couple of things about how we do that. One of the things that we start off by doing is setting the scene. So we start off by understanding any current knowledge on the subject that we're looking to do some research into, and set out some clear business and research goals. And we do that using this research canvas. Again, don't worry too much about the detail, but it's more so just a place that we can fill out with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that everyone has a say on what they think the outcomes of the research should be, and it gives us a clear plan on what's going on moving forward. So once we have a clear direction on the outcomes of the research and who needs to be involved, we can then start planning. And planning is probably about 50% of our time when we do a research activity. The better we plan, the better the outcomes are, the more clear we are on where we need to go and the things that we need to ask. We make sure that all the questions that we ask cover the objectives set out in the research canvas. But we do this in a way, making sure they're open-ended and not leading questions, the usual research etiquette. And then when it comes to recruitment, specifically student recruitment, we have a job advert on the Handshake site that advertises ad hoc or part-time work for students where they get paid to give us their feedback and their experience of being at Exeter. And when they sign up to be part of that recruitment pool, we ask them for a set of demographics. So what course they're on, what year of study they are, what level of study they are, and then also if they have any additional needs or additional requirements. And we use this demographic information when we're selecting who we recruit. So we always want to make sure that we've got a representative sample of our Exeter students, but sometimes we do overrepresent certain groups to make sure that we get all of their feedback. So once we have planned, we then do the research. So we run the research. And a couple of things that we do when we're running them, we always make sure that we have 2 people minimum per session. We have one person who's facilitating the session either on an interview, and then one person will be taking notes, or if we're in a workshop setting, one person will be facilitating and then the other person will be there to sort of help and answer any questions. But we just make sure that we have everything that we need and be super organized before we go into it in case we run into any bumps in the road. Once we've done the research, we then analyse the findings. So there was a section in the research canvas which was asking our stakeholders how they'd like to hear about the feedback, or hear about the findings that we get from the research. So we will pull out and do an activity where we cluster all the findings that we get across all the research activities. We then pull out 3 or 4 main headline findings, and then we want to deliver that back to the stakeholders. And that could be whatever is best for them. If that is in a presentation, if that is in a report, if that is in one paragraph summarizing everything that we've learned, whatever is best for them, that's how we share the findings. But when it also comes to sharing the findings, it's important to us that we build context into where that part of information or that finding fits within the wider student journey. I won't go into too much now because we will cover it in a bit, but we've found a way using visual elements to sort of help build that context and bring a bigger picture to where our findings sit. So the process is spend at least 50% of the time planning to make sure that we're prepared. We then run the sessions, analyse the findings, and then share the findings with the relevant stakeholders.
Lovely. And over the past year, we've applied this process to the creation and ongoing improvement of some of our key products. For example, the My Exeter app was created on user insight into the biggest pain points that students were experiencing. And this started with early generative research to understand needs and problems. Then, through interviews, workshops, and usability testing, we entered a cycle of continuous evaluation and improvement to launch the app, which is being improved based on real student feedback. So it's an app built for students, with students, using user experience research as a tool to make high-level decisions and then evaluating the outputs throughout the design process. And EduExe also played a role in the implementation of the student check-in for international and visa holder students. Through multiple rounds of iterative testing again, we created a way for students to record their attendance in a way that is easy and simple. And it was important, especially here, that we had a student-first approach, because checking into lectures isn't actually something that most students want to do. There's very rarely a desire to log their attendance, but they have to if they are going to meet the requirements set by the Home Office. And so after engaging with students, we understood more about how they felt about the check-in process, and we could see that the challenge for our team is not actually how do you make check-in a fun or interesting activity and encourage it, but how do we reduce the effort and anxiety associated with this mandatory task that has really big implications if they don't do it. And in this case, we iterated until we had simplified the process and focused on just the most important aspects, as well as making it easier and clearer to see if you successfully recorded your attendance, as this was the biggest source of concern or anxiety. And this feature is now being used by over 5,000 international and visa holding students, and the team are exploring how the process can be widened to support other user types to record their attendance as well. And as we support more users, whoever they may be, we inevitably work with more teams and more people. And this means that it becomes increasingly important that we are able to create ways that not only share our findings and research with colleagues and stakeholders, but that we also share that empathy so others can understand why it's important to design with those different users in mind.
So going on from that, like Ben said, there are a couple of things that we want to achieve when we're doing user experience research. We want to understand who our students are and also what our students are doing. So in order to understand who our students are, we want to understand their wants, their needs, their motivations, and their frustrations, which all together help us to generate empathy. And empathy allows our designers to really understand the people that they're designing for. And by understanding what our students are doing, we're able to know the end-to-end experience so that we can make sure we're solving the right problems for our users. So the first challenge was knowing who our students are. Over the last 4 years, and all the research that we've done, it's become clear that there are 3 main behavioural segments or behavioural groupings of our students at Exeter. So we know that different students need different things, but we believe that they sit in our 3 categories. So we have our motivated achiever. These are students that are mature, organised and confident in their ability to do anything. They are really confident working independently. They tend to drive group projects and they'll challenge any products, content, or the things that we provide them to make sure that their needs are met. We then have our happy passenger, who are just as competent and able, but maybe not as motivated as others. They won't necessarily push the boundaries on the things that they can achieve or the challenges or challenge the guidance or content or service that they're provided. They tend to wait for that information and then respond. And then we've got our support seeker, who is as capable as anyone, but their support needs, personal situation, or circumstances make them more likely to struggle or fail to succeed. So our 3 behavioural segments are slightly different to your typical demographic segmentation of university students. So they take into account things like a student's digital confidence or their social dependence or their ability to solve problems. And students don't necessarily fit into one category throughout their whole time. They can move between them in different situations and across their time at Exeter. The creation of these has been long and very thorough, and we're constantly validating them with every research activity that we do. But we are currently confident that these are representative of our Exeter students. The benefits of these behavioural segments is that you can take a behavioural segment and put it in any situation to see how they may behave. And we can then consider this when we're creating a tailored experience. They help us as researchers, our designers, our product owners, and our stakeholders all understand who our Exeter students are. So the next challenge we had was knowing what our students were doing, but from a student perspective. We know that different teams across different parts of the university are delivering parts of that experience, but there was a disconnect in what we were expecting students to experience based on the things that we deliver, and then what the students are actually experiencing. So since September, we've been carrying out some broad research into the student experience and creating a high-level journey map. Now, the visuals are really important here. So you can see on the screen that you've got the same content of the different stages and steps, but it's in an Excel document. It's not particularly pretty and can be a bit hard to follow. So this content here is the same as this content here, but this is much easier to digest. You're able to see where the journey starts, the steps and stages that the students go through, all the way through to when they come out the other end. So it's really important that we wanted to make this as easy to understand as possible so people can use this and understand it and absorb the insights that we're raising so that they can make decisions based on real user insight. But there are a couple of things to note about this student journey. This is from a student perspective, so it takes into account their academic, their personal, and their social elements of being at university, which are normally considered but as 3 separate streams, but we know that the students see them as intertwined within their whole experience. Secondly, this research was conducted at the time of the experience to make sure that we got an accurate account of what the students experienced. So, for example, we completed the onboarding or parts of the onboarding journey research during Welcome Week. And this is also a live document, so we're adding to it as the academic year progresses. and it's iterative, so can change and mold depending on information that we receive, research that we find, or any other validated sources that we get. So the benefits of this type of visual is that it allows us to see the end-to-end journey in its holistic context. At a glance, this map gives people the ability to gain empathy for the students and see where their role fits within the wider student journey. This type of lens helps give our designers, our product teams, and our stakeholders the same level of understanding of the experience that they're working in. We're able to understand what is happening before and after an experience that we're designing, and how that might impact on the way a student interacts with it. And also having a better understanding can also help generate buy-in from stakeholders as well. So at a more granular level, because this is quite high level, we then have our experience maps. So these are a deep dive into how things are connected, or maybe not so connected from a student perspective. So they take into account things that the students are doing within each of those steps, how they're thinking, what they're feeling, any touch points that they engage with, and then any pain points that they experience as well. And the benefits of these visuals is that you can see and connect pain points in one part of the journey and see how they can have an influence further down the line. So both of these visuals, our high-level journey map and our experience maps, give us a real picture of what our extra students are doing.
Thank you. And this is where we're up to now. We think there is value in working towards a shared view of the student experience and exploring how we can visualize this so we can collectively use this to make those decisions and prioritize our next steps. And we've spent this year carrying out the research as we support our products, and now we're looking at how we can evolve those visuals, specifically the journey maps, to have a wider impact outside of our team. And when you try to work across teams, you can quickly start to come across some of the bigger or institutional challenges that make it hard to work together and to make that change. And it's certainly something that we've experienced, and I wouldn't be surprised if you have too, because we're not alone in this, and it's something that is experienced across higher education. I can say this with some confidence because a couple of months ago, we asked our UX counterparts from 17 other universities about their experiences, and when asked what they feel the biggest challenges are to the student experience in their organisation, they talked about things such as complexity. So either the number of systems or products or the number of owners responsible for those across the journey, or even just overwhelming levels of information for their students. And they also talked about student needs not being considered. So staff not being aware of the experience and the impact of their own decisions, or having a lack of agreed definitions, so inconsistencies in terminology or approach. And when asked about the barriers that prevent improvement, they spoke about structural barriers, such as having separated, siloed teams, rigid processes that make it hard to change, or the decision-making process being difficult, or just a general resistance to change. They also talked about cultural barriers. So I jumped over slightly. So they talked about, the structural barriers around resourcing, having siloed teams, or not having access to the right experience. And then there were the cultural barriers, apologies, around resistance to change, decision-making, making it difficult, and the governance processes in place. Now, this is not a sector-wide exhaustive survey, so the responses shouldn't be treated as a definitive picture of the challenges facing digital student experience across HE, but it lets us know that we're not alone in this here at Exeter. We're dealing with extremely complex user experiences that span years, may cross continents, and involve lots and lots of different tasks. So it's difficult to understand, and it can be difficult to improve. Now, that's not an excuse for the gap between the digital experience that universities provide and those that a student experiences in the other parts of their life, because we can definitely do better, but I think it is important to recognise the complexity of the task that students have to complete while with us. So, thinking about these problems of a complex experience coupled with disconnected staff and teams, we think that finding ways to visualise the experience is an important step, and it's what we're working on at the moment. Where can we find ways to help break down those silos and create more joined up thinking across teams to create a focal point so we're looking in the same direction? Well, we're looking at how we can take our journey maps and build on them to help us and colleagues to understand more about the student experience. At the moment, these maps just show us tasks, thoughts and feelings that our students experience over time. But what if we could add more layers to this, use it as a structure to build on, and how would this work? Well, let's take a phase of the student journey. It could be discovery, application, onboarding, learning, anything, as long as we've got a defined period of time that we can view with a high level of zoom. So here, we've got a top-down view of the tasks with time running from left to right, because storing information, as Amelia said, in Word docs and spreadsheets can make it very hard to tell a story. So we're going to build on this line. Now, each of these circles represents an activity, so something that a student needs to do, whether it's academic, personal, or social. And even from something as basic as this, we've now got a sense of order and sequence to those activities, whilst also serving as a foundation from which we can now add more information to enrich our understanding of the student experience. So what if we now update the activity circles to show which of these is the most important or most impactful to the student? Because potentially they could be a source of great excitement or anxiety, or they could be a task that they do regularly. But either way, by giving them a visible difference, we're now starting to understand what matters most to them, to the students. And then what if we now color-coded this to show the quality of the experience of those activities, to highlight the areas that are good or bad for our students? A simple shade of red, green, grey, blue, or even just an icon in the middle of each circle. And we're now building up an idea of just how satisfied they are with each activity. And this is where we really start to see the value of our user experience research activities, because we're not just using reported data from surveys here. We're observing through user testing, or we're diving deep through interviews so that we can build up a solid understanding of what is delivering well, what isn't, and crucially, that context of use again. And then what if we had a way to focus on a particular group of students or a subset that we recognize as needing additional support or services? Because it's important that we don't overcomplicate things by trying to be everything for everyone, but we can add optional layers on top of this foundation that offer greater focus on a group of students. Now, a good example of this could be those international students I mentioned earlier on. We know from our mapping that they have a lot of overlap with home students during, say, the onboarding phase, but they also have some different or additional tasks. And by adding a layer that shows variation from the foundation, we can view their experiences without having to separate them out. So we can see which activities stand out, both within this user type and when seen alongside others. And then what if we add a layer for another activity type? So what if we mapped in all of the communications we sent to students during that phase, so we can further build up our view of the overall engagement between student and university? Now, we already know from that foundation level what is exciting or worrying the students. So do these communications meet their needs? Are they timed correctly? Are they written in a way that is sensitive to the wider challenges and difficulties that they may be facing? And when we consider not just the academic pressures, but also the social and personal. Now, I know that here at Exeter, we have colleagues and teams working to answer some of these questions around communications, but the more information that we can gather and usefully visualize, the better our chances of understanding what it is like to be a student, what the pressures are as they complete their tasks, and how we can make the experience better for them. And then finally, what if we then go a step further and use the same mapping as a tool to understand the staff, the people in the teams responsible for delivering this journey? If we link the activities to the stakeholders or owners, we can start to see where there may be organizational factors affecting the student flow between activities or the delivery of the experience. At an operational level, we can see how many people are needed to get the ball rolling on a particular problem, whilst at a more senior level, we may be able to assess how we deliver services to those students. Now, these are just the layers that have come out from our current research and the work that others are doing at Exeter, but we could add any number of layers to this foundation. By carrying out methodical, consistent research and applying it in this way, we can build up a picture of the student experience and use it to help us as we drive the changes that we want to make. Now, whilst this is more theoretical and something that we're working on at the moment, so it's more theoretical than the tangible examples Amelia presented earlier, this is still built on that foundation of research, and it brings with it multiple benefits. So firstly, we are now looking at this together. It's a shared understanding between us as staff. Now, it seems obvious, but we're now consciously starting to address some of the challenges that are affecting lots of universities across higher education. Take siloed working, for example. We may not be able to affect the physical structure of our university, but we can all take a view from one side, from the student side, and understand better how we collectively take responsibility for their experience. And as we do this, we're also going to be creating that empathy and an increased awareness of student need. The more of us that take a shared view, the more of us will learn about those frustrations, anxieties, and pain points, and be able to consider the people at the end of each interaction. Moving on to the third point, All of this information and awareness is going to make it easier to prioritize what we work on next or where we put our resources, because we can see what's not working well and how we're currently delivering. We're better placed to make joined up, evidence-led decisions and work together. Because if we only view the changes each team wants to make in isolation, then we risk never getting on top of the major barriers to digital transformation, as the benefit can always seem too small for the effort. User need is not the only factor in decision making, but if we can see the full impact of our decisions, or we can see how many parts of a journey could benefit from a change, then we may be better able to justify the bigger efforts needed around, say, our data access, our policies, or our infrastructure. So we're working together more, we're getting to know our students, and we're a little clearer on our decision making. Next, we can start to hunt out those inconsistencies and unnecessary complexity, the confusing or abstract things or steps that those students have to do because of legacy processes or policy or design. And by design, I don't just mean make them the same color and include the logo. I mean the consistency of navigation, of error responses, and interaction behaviors across multiple activities and product platforms and products. In a perfect world, nobody has to learn or be told how to use our digital products, as they are intuitive. But in reality, there is usually a learning curve for almost every one of the different systems or products that we put out there. And finally, as we do more, there is a cumulative effect of these benefits as we help to address those wider structural and procedural challenges inherent in big universities. It's not a direct, tangible benefit of good user experience research, but all of this helps to increase our collective UX maturity. We're culturally becoming better connected to each other, to our research, and to our students. So we do more research, we share more knowledge, and because we do it visibly, we drive buy-in and we invite discussion. So if somebody disagrees with the placement, the priority, or the impact of an activity, that's a good thing, because we can get together, we can add in the evidence, and we can update and we can iterate. So that's how we've been using the visuals to support our product teams, but also how we're now growing this to have a greater impact on the wider student experience. Now, there have been lots of benefits that have come out of this so far, but there have also been some potential issues to bear in mind as we go. And firstly, the outcomes that we get, those behavioral segments and those detailed maps, well, that information and insight gathered is specific to one user group or potentially one situation. There may be strong similarities in the challenges when it comes to digital working, either from team to team or even across the sort of higher education sector, but it is important that we remember the potentially unique context that we and our students find ourselves in. So we can't copy exactly what has been done elsewhere and expect it to solve our problems perfectly. And secondly, user experience research needs commitment, certain skills, and the autonomy to go where there are gaps in our knowledge or where there are pieces of the map missing. Understanding the student experience and, most important, areas to tackle will touch all parts of the university. So it is very hard to do this within scope-limited teams or ring-fenced systems.
So there are challenges to carrying out user experience research, and there are lots of benefits when we get it right. So we're fortunate. Oh, is this right? Sorry. I think I've jumped ahead,
Yes.
maybe.
Yep,
Okay. Sorry. Trying to do too many things at once. But we're fortunate that we work within a wider team of we work within a wider team of UX people, so we can form part of a wider process. But in general, if we do the research in a structured user-led way, and we share the insights that we gather, we get a good chance of influencing not just the immediate products that we support, but also to help tackle some of the bigger challenges that we all face. So hopefully this has been a useful introduction on how we are using user experience research, the visuals that we're creating, and how we are and will be using them in the future. So we're happy to take any questions now, but you're very welcome to get in touch with either of us if you've got any specific questions or areas that you'd like to talk about. We've got our contact details here on screen. And you're also welcome to scan the QR code and have a closer look at some of the visuals that we talked about earlier. This QR code will take you to that folder where it's got all of the information in it. But anyway, thank you for your time, and we'll hand over in case we've got any questions.